What's up, guys? In case you haven't noticed, everybody wants to work in AI/ML and specifically researching cutting-edge technology, right? And so naturally, there's been tons of degree inflation that unfortunately leads people to believe that you need like a PhD or at least a master's. And as somebody who's doing AI/ML research with just a bachelor's and not even in computer science, by the way, I can confidently say that you don't need one. Like, obviously they help for reasons we'll talk about. It's not like an exclusive thing that you have to do in order to break into this field, right? And so in this video, I want to share some of the lessons I've learned along the way that actually make me believe it's a lot more accessible to people than they realize. Like, you really can break into this field in some alternative ways that we'll talk about. Like I said, I'm an AI/ML researcher, specifically within the aerospace and defense sector. And yeah, I'm the unhinged engineer, in case you couldn't tell by the goofy stick. I make professional development content for people trying to work in my field or similar ones, trying to lead an awesome career. Maybe they're early on like I am, fresh out of school. And yeah, if that's something you're interested in, please like, comment, subscribe, and let's get right into the video. Okay, so the two main reasons I think people assume you need these advanced degrees in order to break into the ML research or engineering field is, number one, how competitive it is. And number two, just the sheer like spread of things that you're perceived to need to know how to do, right? And I'm gonna talk about how competitive the field is at the end, because that's kind of the one that's less in our control. So for the majority of the video, I'm gonna talk about like how can we cover the span of topics that an ML researcher is expected to know without doing a PhD, right? And so before I get into it, let me just write out like what I mean by these topics. Okay, so I have listed here like some of the topics that you might be expected to know in an ML engineering interview, okay? And if it's scary, I agree. This is a massive, massive spread of different topics, like breadth of different topics. And what is important to note here is like PhDs aren't about breadth, they're about depth, right? Talk to anyone who's done a PhD and they will tell you that a PhD was like 5 or so years of just going super, super deep into one or maybe a couple of these topics, maybe deep learning and GPU programming or ML ops and statistics, right? Like going super, super deep into a small subset of the vast amount of things that you could be expected to know for ML research, right? You don't need to know everything here. Like, no PhD covers everything here, okay? But what it does do is it expects you to go on a deep dive into a subset of these topics and produce novel work or insight from it. Integrating multiple work areas together and then coming out of that arduous process with novel takeaways and design decisions is what PhDs are paid to do, okay? And so we can go through that experience in a few like ways, like alternative ways that let's talk about now. Okay, let's get the easy one out of the way here, right? Number one, if you're still in undergrad, do some undergrad research, right? Obviously, it's not going to get as technically in-depth as a PhD would, but it's a good way to kind of like demonstrate the skill early on in your career. And I know that it helped me out a lot for the later internships in the research field that I wound up doing and led me to my current job. That's a simple one. I actually made an entire video about it. So let's move on, okay? Number two, the design phase, or I'll call it like entire life cycle. So what I mean by this is like the way, the phase of engineering projects, specifically with machine learning, that require this skill of integrating multiple work areas and then making decisions based on that is the very beginning. And so we're trying to stand up a new system. We don't have anything yet, or we just kind of have like a hodgepodge of different components. We have to integrate them together in some efficient way. And so if you can get in at the design phase of a project and see it all the way through to the end of that engineering lifecycle, you can see a project through from A all the way to B. That teaches you a ton. And think about these large-scale ML projects. Like, everybody on these large-scale ML projects doesn't have a PhD. They need traditional software engineers. They need IT people. They need even people in like, I don't know, business and finance, right? You don't need that like extreme technical deep dive to be in the room for these projects. And I guarantee you, like, the design phase, that early kind of slow roll, pushing the boulder up a hill of standing up a new project, everybody's going to be involved in that process. It takes all hands on deck, right? And so this is largely the kinds of experiences that I've had throughout my internships and currently at my job. It's like getting in at the ground floor of trying to do like a proof of concept or something new and seeing it all the way through to the end, right? And in case it's not clear, I don't have a PhD. I work with people with PhDs. Their PhDs certainly help and give them a lot of the context and wisdom that I don't have yet, but I'm still in the room, I'm still doing cool shit, and I guarantee you that these experiences are going to help me get my next job. Next one I want to talk about here is personal projects. I've talked a lot about personal projects on this channel, but I want to, kind of contradict myself here for a minute. Usually with personal projects, I'm against doing everything from scratch because it can just be a waste of time and prohibit us from getting to the thing that we actually want to learn about. However, with the specific goal of getting into like PhD level research, doing things from scratch actually gives you a lot of these skills that we're talking about here, right? Let me just provide an example. I haven't done this before, for the record. There's a lot. Like if you're trying to build ChatGPT from scratch, you build the transformer model, right? You set up all the attention layers in the architecture. You set up auto differentiation and training and reinforcement learning for that large language model, right? You do all the inference optimizations. Like you do all this from scratch. This is a to preface, pretty inefficient project. This will take you a very long time, right? And in terms of jumping off the page, it might not jump off the page as much as integrating a bunch of existing technologies in a cool way that's like visually appealing. But if your real goal is to get at like the root of these technologies and really understand them in a fundamental level that someone who got a PhD and took like 3 courses in these topics would, this is a great way to do it on your own for free. Okay, it will take long, it will be a pain in the ass, but it will teach you a ton at the deep level of like integrating calculus and software engineering and like all these different topics. Just watch a lecture on how AutoDiff works and you will immediately see like how many different things the people at FAIR, which was the research lab at Meta, Facebook at the time, I think, had to use to make that happen for PyTorch, okay? Like it is crazy. And so doing some of these things from scratch will teach you a lot. And I actually have a friend who's doing all these things from scratch in Zig, right? Which is like a newer programming language, systems programming. And he constantly tells me about like the technical details that he's had to learn about on that journey of building like a neural network training and inference like framework from scratch in a different language. That is a crazy project. Definitely like a 10x engineer at our organization. Now, this is like the most drastic piece of advice I would give, but if you're really serious about doing research and you don't have the term research in your title yet, I'm not really motivated by titles a lot personally. I don't have research in my title, but that's okay. Even if you can't get that word in your title yet, go to an organization whose main output is research. Okay, my group, it's mainly publications, proof of concepts, tech demos for our stakeholders. Like we are doing research. We're a research institute. Okay, and being there, even just as a lowly, bachelor educated software engineer, I am learning a ton of stuff about the research process, both from these PhD people that we're talking about, and also just the process of being on these projects in general. And again, the next place I go to, I guarantee you that I could try to say, look, I've done research. I've been a researcher for a long time. And I know you usually like your PhDs, and I know you usually like these credentials, but I have published before. I have integrated novel technologies in a new way that only researchers can do and prototype new stuff and done field tests, right? Like I can talk about, gone to conferences and presented my work. I can talk about these experiences even though I myself am not an ML researcher, but I'm doing research in the ML field, okay? So I'm basically an ML researcher at this point. And so it's like, I don't tell people to run off and get a new job lightly. Obviously that's a big decision, but if this is something that you're really serious about, then getting a job at an organization geared towards doing research can land you a position geared towards doing research at your next organization, assuming it's not also a research organization, right? Just as an example, research and development center for the government, work there for a while, do this ML research as a software engineer, and then you go to like a defense contractor. You say, hey, I've been working on new stuff in this field for years. Okay, and I just have a bachelor's, but look at all this fancy stuff on my resume. Or, you work in for an academic research lab tied to a university, and then you go to big tech, and you're like, even though I was just a software engineer, and I don't have my PhD yet, I've been doing all this research in fields that you care about. Look at all this practical experience I have, okay? Like, this is an alternative way to get your foot in the door. Yeah, these are kind of like the general skews of like experience that can give us similar results to a PhD. Again, PhDs are very long and very arduous. I don't want to like undermine anybody's doctorate. They're very difficult and I haven't done one yet, but it's like, these are ways that we can kind of mimic those lessons on our own. And I think they're super valuable. Here's the last thing I want to talk about, right? I've mostly focused here on technical stuff because, on this channel and in life, I like to focus on things we can control. But I also want to talk about like how competitive the job market is, because yes, I'm not going to beat around the bush. If like the resume parsers in ATS want their PhDs, people with PhDs are going to have an advantage, okay? It's just a fact of life. But this entire channel is geared around different ways to get an advantage that people might not have thought about. Personal projects, research experiences, contributing to open source, like being intentional about how we frame things on our resume and at conferences and stuff like that. Like, these are all different ways that we can, get our own competitive advantage in the job hunt. And so, what I want to get at here is like, yes, there's a lot of degree inflation. People care about their PhDs. There are also lots of other things that people care about. And I guarantee you that as AI becomes more ubiquitous and integrated into more industries around the world, this level of degree credentialism will come down, right? So if we stay at it, if we work on the things I talked about, again, I erased them all too early. I always do that. If we stick to the things we just talked about in this video of getting experiences that kind of mimic that research work that you would do in a PhD, if we do some of the other things we talked about on this channel with our resume and interviews and stuff like that, and we get lucky, like, it is definitely possible to have your competitive advantages outweigh somebody with a PhD. It does happen, and I see it happen all the time. So don't think it's impossible without a PhD. All right, that's basically everything I want to talk about. Thank you so much for watching. Like I said, I am the Unhinged Engineer. I do AI/ML research in the aerospace and defense sector, and I'm just making content for people in my field or similar fields who are trying to stand out in their career early on, build super cool stuff, make tons of money, be super rewarded by this awesome field we've chosen of engineering. And if that's something you're interested in, please like, comment, subscribe. This is the channel for you, I guarantee it. And I will see you in the next episode.